Welcome into Eye on Northeast Kansas, the podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Bruner. This is where we recap some of the top interviews you saw on Eye on Northeast Kansas, the TV show. It comes to you streaming live 4 o'clock Central Time, Monday through Friday from our WIBW TV studios in the capital of Kansas, the great city of Topeka. If you've been following along, you know that we've been celebrating Women's History Month by celebrating and inviting some of the great women leaders we've had in our area onto the red couch for conversations. We had a couple great segments this week. Let's start with Sharon Sullivan and Marilynn Ault. These two ladies have really changed the conversation surrounding sexual and domestic violence and human trafficking, not just in Topeka, but all around Northeast Kansas, and their influence has been felt even beyond that. Sharon Sullivan is a professor at Washburn University. She started the Topeka and Shawnee County Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Marilynn Ault started the Battered Women's Task Force through the YWCA of Northeast Kansas. Today is known as the Center for Safety and Empowerment, and she described even how that had its origins. Sharon and Marilynn were fantastic to hear from, not just about where we were, but how far we've come and the work that remains.
Melissa.
And Marilynn, when did the Battered Women's Task Force start?
Well, actually, the first thing that started was in 1973 was a sexual assault counseling program, and that started because of a man. And it was a fellow who worked at the court services, Leo Taylor was his name, and he called the YWCA and said, would you get a group of women together? I'm really concerned about how poorly rape victims are treated and what they have to go through, and I think we could do better. Would you get a group of women together? And 30 women showed up for that meeting. It helped that he was tall and very handsome, but moving right along, what he had heard was there was a program in Wichita that had just started. And so we got a carload of those women, and they went down and spent the day to find out what they were doing in Wichita, and came back, and then we started, called it the Sexual Assault Counseling Program. Didn't have any money, so we had to get volunteers to volunteer. We did training. We got staff from Meningers to come in and talk about if you've been traumatized, what might that be like? How can you help somebody who's been traumatized? We worked out with the Shawnee Community Crisis Hotline that they would take the call originally and then call one of our people who would show up if it were a brand new sexual assault and the woman was at the hospital going through trying to get evidence in case the case went to court. And
None of that existed back then.
No.
The sane start programs and things we have now.
No.
And then leading up to BWTF, what was missing when it came to women who were experiencing domestic violence?
So that happened later, and it really came from a couple of, I think they were volunteer YWCA members that were sent to the national meeting, and they came back to Topeka and said, hey, there are domestic violence programs that YWCAs are doing in other parts of the country. I think we ought to look into that. So that's how one started earlier than the other, and then we finally merged the two programs.
And now we come through the years and we realize that human trafficking is an issue. Sharon, how did you develop that interest, and why did you see it as something we needed to be paying attention to in this area?
So I was supporting some students about 20 years ago now who were having Slavery Awareness Week. I thought I knew what that meant. I got there and I didn't know what it meant. They were saying, you know, Dr. Sullivan, it's happening right here in Kansas. It's happening in Topeka. And I was like, really? I need to do my research on that. And once I started looking at it, I realized that it was on the continuum of work I was already doing around violence against women and girls. And at that time, there weren't very many people in the community doing that work. There were about 3 or 4 of us in Kansas doing the work, and so I just kind of tagged on and tried to make myself an expert on it.
What is the challenge in addressing human trafficking?
I think the challenge is that people do not understand the ways that vulnerabilities make us vulnerable to all different kinds of abuse and exploitation, including human trafficking. So I very much see sexual assault, domestic violence. These are all part of human trafficking, and so helping the community understand the vulnerabilities of people in our community, that these are our neighbors, our daughters, our sons, our sisters and brothers, I think has been the hardest thing. People want to think that this is something that happens to people over there instead of it happening right here in our backyards.
Continuing our conversation with Marilynn Ault and Sharon Sullivan, who both are advocates when it comes to anti-domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking services that we have in our area, largely thanks to the efforts that the two of you have been so heavily involved in over the years. But Marilynn, you said there's one kind of piece of the puzzle that remains. So you have the services in place for the victims now. What do we need to do to stop the cycle?
Yeah, well, what are we doing to prevent people or help people not become an abuser? What is it that we're missing? In the batters intervention that we did back in the day, we would ask, there was one, we would sort of take an idea or a feeling or and talk about that for part of the time. And whenever it came up with respect and we ask, who in your life have you most respected? Almost 100% of the time it was their mother. And yet when they married or were living with somebody who was female and even having their children, he may have seen abuse against his mother or not, then he was being abusive to her. And so we'd say, well, you know,
where does that disconnect come?
How does that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Such a tough question and something that we still have a challenge on, because especially when we talk about human trafficking, there is a lot more awareness around it today, Sharon. Mm-hmm. But yet it still happens. We reported an arrest here just about a week ago on a situation.
Yeah, and to follow up on Marilynn's point, we absolutely need to address sex buyers. If there's no buyers, I mean, it's a basic business. If there's no buyers, there's no need to supply people to be purchased. So when it comes to sex trafficking, that's a pretty easy answer. Of course, when we start looking at labor trafficking, we're all complicit in that, right? We all buy things that are made by people who are enslaved. And so that's a much bigger conversation that we're talking about.
But even all of these issues are complicated conversations, because it's not just we've talked about this over the years with BWTF, now CSE. Well, why doesn't the woman just leave? It's a lot more complicated than that. And then same with human trafficking. Well, why don't they just leave? Then what? So where do we get to then? And I'm wondering, has there been any pushback as you tried to get these services started, as you tried to start the conversations? You
know, we were talking once with those of us that were doing the business, and we were talking about how can we make some difference legislatively. And somebody brought up, you know, with domestic violence, the law then was if law enforcement came to a home and they saw something that was against the law, it read, if there's you know, evidence, you may arrest.
May
and
arrest.
It was like, wait a minute,
not,
what about
not will arrest
or must arrest? And what if we went to legislators and talked to them about that? Would we have any? I don't think so, but let's try it. It passed just like that. So if you've seen a crime and you know, this has happened, you've got lots of evidence, then arrest them. They may not have to do much time, or there may not be huge consequences, but it's a message of, you don't do this. This is illegal.
And what about for human trafficking? Where are we at in that legislative continuum?
We still have more work to do. I think that we are slowly starting to make some progress. One of the things that the Human Trafficking Advisory Board has recommended increasing sex buying to a felony instead of a misdemeanor. So I don't know if that's really going to happen or not, but it's something that would at least, I mean, I think we have to work on this on multiple levels. And when you say that buying sex is only a misdemeanor, it tells our community that it's not very meaningful. So I think on a community level, we have to help people understand the harms of human trafficking. And then at the macro level, of course, then we need to change the legislation to make sure that people can get justice.
Our time is winding down, but quick final thoughts, message to the next generation of young ladies to know that this is wrong and they don't have to be victims.
Yeah, you deserve to be happy. people who love you want the best for you, and they don't
Marilynn?
put you down.
Yeah, Marilynn?
And that you keep needing to focus on that. I mean, just be very clear about who you want to be with. If there are signals early on that something's amiss or there will be violence, you need to figure out how to get out of that.
Well, we will have the link to your legacy, the Center for Safety
Yes.
and Empowerment, on WIBW.com. Marilynn and
Thank
Sharon, thank you so very much. We appreciate all the work you've done for decades on this issue.
Thank you for having us.
It was such an honor to host Marilynn and Sharon and hear about what motivated their work and also why this is such a relevant conversation to continue having even today. Also this week, we welcomed Veronica Padilla and Michelle Cuevas Stubblefield to the Red Couch. Both are former national leaders of the MANA organization. That is a group that works to provide mentoring and leadership opportunities for young ladies of Latina descent. Both also have been active in our local chapter. Michelle founded it, and she said Ronnie was one of the key figures in helping her do that. They both have successful professional careers as well. Ronnie had a career in various sales arenas, and Michelle is currently one of our vice presidents for the Greater Topeka Partnership, working in the arena of economic development. We talked to them about finding their own voices in the world.
Welcome to both of you. Glad to
very
have you
much.
both here.
Thank you.
And I don't want to just jump in with this, but I'm going to, because one thing I did not say, Ronnie, when introducing you is that she's the mayor's wife.
Yes, I am.
And I know that we're proud of our husbands and all that they do, but you're an accomplished woman in your own right. So how do you balance those two things out and let people know you're Veronica Padilla? You're not just the mayor's wife.
Oh, that's absolutely true. Well, actually, it's been great. I've enjoyed it. I've been to a lot of places I wasn't before, but yet he is very much a partner in our marriage partnership, in that he gives me room, he gives me space, and he lets me do a lot of the things that I want to do too. So we kind of go hand in hand, help each other out, and attend each other's events, and we do it happily.
How is that a big lesson for women, though, to make sure they have that identity in their own right?
How do I?
Make sure you have your own identity.
I never really thought about it before, other than the fact that I just always have been able to get out and visit, meet other people, and take my time and let them know that I'm there. And we're two individuals. He is the mayor, not me. He got elected. So I'm happy to work with him and be with him side by side, but that's his job.
You do your own thing. And it
And
is
I
quite
do
a
my
big
own.
thing, all that the both of you have done for MANA. Michelle, when you looked at other Latina women, what was missing maybe perhaps when you were working your way up and building your career that made you want to start MANA?
I think representation, voice, a perspective that traditionally was not seen, and just making sure that we've got the skill sets, we've got the abilities, but often maybe we don't speak loud enough to make sure that we are heard, and taking up that space that's needed to exhibit leadership. That's what I wanted for every young woman.
Is there anything in the Latino culture that Latinas, that young ladies in particular, maybe needed to learn in terms of finding their voice?
You know, I come from an amazing family and immigrant background where you just put your head down, did your work. It was never, you were never to be boastful and those type of things. And I think when we're not boastful, when we don't say, hey, here's what we're capable of, then it can be easily missed. And giving people that strength to have their voice, to claim their space is extremely important, and so that they can see others in that space as well, and dream for themselves and reach their goals.
Seems like a lot of women in general kind of feel
Absolutely.
that way. What are the lessons you've learned along the way, Ronnie, about making your voice heard and not feeling like you needed to fade into the background because you were a supportive woman?
Well, I think it's good to be a supportive woman, but I do think that as I've grown up and grown older, I've learned that a lot of the jobs that I've done along the way have been traditionally men's jobs. I've been in estimating and sales, in sales communities where it was primarily all men. So you do have to learn how to speak up and speak out, because if you don't, nobody's going to do it for you. I think it's really important to let young women know that it's good to speak up. Do it respectfully, but do it so that you're heard, and know that it's good for you. It's a great way to be.
And I would imagine, Michelle, it's been similar for you, working in economic development, that typically our economic development leaders and business leaders have been men.
Yeah. It is an industry primarily of men. I mean, Topeka has a history of strong men leading the community, but I think, our population is over 50% women, I think, here in Shawnee County. And while we are still claiming space, a lot of progress has been made, and women are a big part of that progress here in the community.
Continuing our conversation with Veronica Padilla and Michelle Cuevas Stubblefield. Ladies, so glad to have you along as we celebrate Women's History Month. And Michelle, there is a history of groundbreaking ladies in your family. Your grandmother was Teresa Cuevas.
Teresa Cuevas,
Tell us about her.
She's one of the first all-female mariachi women and created a group in the U.S., one of the first. And she actually has a statue downtown in her honor.
She is the only woman to have a statue in downtown Topeka. How much does that mean to your family?
Oh, extremely important. Having representation, a proud Latina, being able to honor the community and tell her story is just a dream.
What did you learn from her and from her leadership as a woman? Because once again, mariachi music was the men.
Mariachi music was the men, but they came to it so naturally. They took great care of the music. But it was also just a part of them, so there was no reason to not enter into that. But she loved her family dearly, but she also reminded us of our own responsibility to family, community, and how we should represent our culture, and then who we were as individuals. She pushed that every time we saw her, of how proud she was, and that we were all to go out and do something.
Such a great lesson. Yeah. Who were the role models in your life?
Well, actually, my mom. My mom was, she came from a really large family, as did my dad. So my parents were very, very big role models for me. She was another one. I think a lot of our Latina mothers were very much into, we love you dearly, we want you to do well, but don't forget your culture. Don't forget where we came from. And always remember that's going to be a part of you, and you make it a part of your kids too. So,
how do you pay that lesson forward? Why is it important to embrace our cultures while we also move toward the future?
Well, for me, I think it's important just because it's such a rich culture, and I know we all come from different groups and different parts of the world and different countries, so there's something to be proud about from everyone. And we're such a wealthy country in the richness of our cultures, but I just am a little prejudiced. I just happen to think ours is one of the really great ones. And that's how our parents taught us. My grandmother, I never got a chance to meet my grandmother on my mother's side, but on my father's side, my grandmother was very much about remembering your history and remembering family.
Well, we enjoy celebrating our city's Hispanic community during Fiesta Topeka every year. We're already looking forward to that. We had mentioned the Hermanitas. You have something coming up, or we mentioned Mana, but you have Hermanitas coming up this week, right, Michelle? What is that all about, and what are you going to be doing with young ladies?
It is a full day of really young women, usually around 12 to 18 years old, who get a day of self-esteem, understanding what's possible, learning about education, but also getting to experience and meet other adults, women in particular, from different backgrounds, different occupations, so that it's kind of a speed dating occupation where they meet, find out what it's like to be their job. And several young ladies have done this for several years. We've got the largest group yet left of about 275 who are going to be all at Washburn University. So it's a day to enjoy, and it's a day to dream, and it's a day to prepare for their future.
You both keep coming back to this, preparing the next generation. What is the lesson you, Michelle, hope to impart?
That regardless of your situation in life, that you are capable, you're promotable, You are worthy of everything that you desire, and sometimes it takes a little work, but there are people behind you who are willing to push you along and help you along the way.
And Ronnie, how about you? What's your lesson to the next generation?
Well, I'd say ditto to what she said, quite honestly, because it is true. I mean, they're enough, and they have to know that, you know, we will do anything and everything we can to help push them forward, because they're capable. They just don't quite realize it yet. So we want them to see what's out there, what's available to them. We bring in professionals from all across the city in many different professions who will move from table to table and let them know what they do for their profession and how they can attain those goals.
They are enough. I like that.
Yeah,
Veronica, Padilla, Michelle Cuevas, Stubblefield, thank you both so very much.
Well, thank you.
The big Hermanitas Conference was Friday in the capital city. You saw coverage of that on WIBW TV. You can find it on our website as well. Another conversation that was women-focused this week, it had to do with women's mental health. We welcome Dr. Laura Seidlinger and Dr. Carrie Moore. They both work for Vallejo Behavioral Health in Topeka. Since this is Women's History Month, we wanted to know some of the unique considerations that play into mental health for women.
And this is a key topic because this is an issue that does impact women a little bit disproportionately. Laura, how are women impacted by mental health?
Exactly. So typically, if you just look at the general population, women are twice as likely to have mental health diagnoses compared to men. And that seems like, well, why would that be? Part of it may be related to the expectations for women that they should be mothers and successful business people or employees, and also taking care of everyone at home and the home, and perhaps not only children but parents. So it can be really challenging to meet all of those expectations.
It's interesting because we often hear how women ignore their own health, but yet they have this more common diagnosis.
Need.
Is there something physiological here going on too, Carrie?
Sure. I mean, part of that would be the hormones. We have different hormones that we're dealing with, and at different stages of life, they impact us differently. For women, I mean, obviously there's puberty, but then going through menopause, with pregnancy, that's a concern to have to deal with postpartum depression or changes in your depression or anxiety or symptoms like that too. So, are
there different things at different stages of life to look for when it comes to seeing how those sorts of physiological things might be impacting us with our mental and behavioral well-being?
Well, typically we see changes in mental health with women in early to mid adulthood. Mm-hmm. That's where you'll see that typically occur. And again, Laura has already mentioned, being sandwiched in at that point in your life where a lot of women are dealing with their children and their parents at the same time, and expected to take on so many different roles at that time as well can kind of play into that.
What about genetic conditions? Is there anything genetically that's linked to maybe predisposing certain women to something more so than other women?
Certainly we see some heritability in that. It seems like mental illness may fall in certain lines, and especially women in certain lines. Depression and anxiety are probably the two most common things we see, but also disordered eating and PTSD. Women are twice as likely to develop PTSD compared to a man. Now we all experience traumatic events in our lives, and we typically recover, respond, move on past that. But for some people, those events are really stifling and arrest them into this very stuck place. Where they're very overwhelmed and respond unexpectedly to stimuli that we wouldn't necessarily expect someone to jump or be startled by. And women, because of the nature of the abuses that they've experienced in childhood and even in adulthood, and also related to assaults, they are much more likely to develop a long-standing trauma diagnoses. But the best news is that it's all treatable.
I was going to say, so we know this is an issue. How do we help it? And I guess before we even get to how we can help it, just real quick, how do you know the difference between, gosh, I'm just a little bit moody today, versus this is something I need to get help for?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, I think we see patterns of behaviors that basically stay that way, not able to move on from it. It becomes something that, You know, it's just not a few days here or there. It's not about a specific stressor that's going on in life that's attributed to that at one point in time, and it's not going away. So, you know, we see those changes in someone isolating themselves, right? Changes in mood, irritability.
But they go on and on. So once we notice that,
continues to happen.
how do we help it?
The duration for sure. So we are all about treating mental health no differently than we treat any other physical health issues. So sometimes that requires lifestyle changes. So if you have high cholesterol, you might change your diet. Well, if you are depressed, we might encourage you to get more physical activity, watch what you're eating, make sure you're getting good quality and quantity of sleep, because if you don't get into a REM cycle, you don't get your reset button hit, and it's really hard to function. And so those are really key things. And most people don't realize that healthy eating is really critical, because 80% of the serotonin receptors, which really impact depression and anxiety, are in the gut. Only 20% are actually in the brain. And so when we do change our eating patterns, it really does impact mood.
And then in some cases, medication, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the most important thing to me is first, just talk to someone. If it initially that's not a healthcare professional that you're comfortable with, start with your partner, start with your friends, start with your extended family, anyone who makes that you trust, that makes you feel maybe a little bit more comfortable talking about it first. And then, you know, reach out.
Reach out. And here's how you can reach out. If you are in immediate danger, you can call 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 988. You can call or text. Vallejo has a crisis line, 785-234-3300. Their website, vallejo-topeka.org. And then, of course, we have these resources and a whole lot more at WIBW.com/hearmeseeme for providers throughout Northeast Kansas. Such important information. Dr. Seidlinger, Dr. Moore, thank you so very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Remember, you can always find a variety of resources and topics that we've addressed on WIBW.com/hearmeseeme. It is our big mental health initiative where we are really focusing in this year on various issues surrounding mental health. We took a little time to get an update on what's happening around downtown Topeka and the Kansas riverfront through Shawnee County. Ashley Gilfillan is in charge of both of those areas for the Greater Topeka Partnership. She said a lot has been happening.
And it's almost like St. Patrick's Day. This past weekend was kind of the line in the sand between taking a little bit of a break in downtown and let's go for it.
That's
it was
right.
so busy for Irish Fest.
It was. And one of the things that I like to tell people is that with that big event, that's 3 different groups coming together to put something on like that. So you have Celtic Fox, the Irish Fest out of Mater Dei, and then you also have the Irish Club of Topeka that is the parade. So it's really a community effort.
3 events in one, and it brought thousands of people down there. But this is just the beginning, because what happens from here? This is kind of kicking off everything that happens downtown.
Yeah, so right now, Evergy Plaza is getting ready to roll out their events in April. You'll start seeing Live at Lunch come back on Wednesdays. You'll have Friday Flicks coming back every second Friday of the month, with the first movie being Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And then you have great events like the Read and Roll from the United Way and Parents as Teachers, as well as Top City Half Marathon going on in April too. So it's really kind of that right out of the gate, St. Patrick's Day sets us up.
And we should say Top City Half Marathon also has a 5K option, so which is more my speed these days. Yeah. And all summer concert series, will we be seeing anything like that coming back to downtown again this year?
You will. You'll see the second Saturdays going on to Celtic Fox, I'm sure. They're gearing up for some stuff. And you also will see the Eats and Beats festivals going on, as well as one-off events at Evergy Plaza. So it's really gearing up. And they even have some events coming this year that are definitely different than what they've done in the past. And so it'll be a unique
Anything you can give us a hint?
It will be a sanctioned boxing match.
In Evergy Plaza.
In Evergy Plaza.
Very fun.
Free for the public to attend.
Of course, TPAC also is fun because it adds to the life downtown. And I love the announcement that came out today. I just want to say I called this. I'd been wondering when this was going to happen, because surely the band Kansas cannot do a 50th anniversary tour without coming home.
That's exactly
And they're coming
right.
home.
They are. They're coming home October 4th, I believe is the date, and tickets go on sale this Friday.
This Friday, so be there to TPAC. A lot of people have been talking about the riverfront, and that's a process that continues to move forward. What is the status right now? And as people always ask the question, you've been talking about it, Ashley, when are we going to see something start to happen?
Exactly. So with the riverfront, we did the first round of engagement, and what we learned is that our community sees it as an asset that is not utilized. What that gives us, though, is room to grow with recreational activities, pedestrian access, as well as some economic development. That's with this next round of engagement. We're going to start pushing out through April. We're going to be doing engagements April through almost October in person, online, meeting people where they're at, in English and Spanish, to ensure that we're getting the whole community's buy-in to see what we want to see down there.
Is there a timeline yet, or how close are we to being able to actually set a timeline? Because as I recall, gosh, more than a decade ago, part of the holdup was, well, we know they're going to rebuild the Pope Quincy Viaduct, we just don't know when. And so until we know what that project's going to look like, what the timeline for that project is going to be, you kind of were on hold with the riverfront because that's going to impact it.
A little bit, and for a while they were doing those things behind the scenes, making our river safe with the new weir, adding signage. So now we're kind of doing the fun stuff. What do we get to see that will connect downtown to Noto with the Pope Quincy and the river development? So it gives us a few years to be messy. I think we're on track for Momentum 2027 to deliver a 21st riverfront.
Sometimes things get messy before they get beautiful.
Exactly. Yes, that will definitely
Well,
happen.
we'll keep watching for the timeline on when all of that will start to unfold. Meantime, if people want to let you know what they want to see, how can they continue to get engaged with this next phase?
MyTopekaRiverfront.com. Right now, there's not a survey out right now because we're gearing up to put the second one out that will kind of hone in on the details. But there is an interactive map where you can leave notes, where you can put, this is where I think a restaurant should go, this is where we should have trails. And if somebody's already put it there, you can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So it's very interactive, and we want as many people as possible to take it.
I think a trail along the levee would be, I love trails. So
Right, yeah.
Thank you. Ashley, appreciate it. A
Thank
lot
you.
going on. Thanks for the update.
We end this episode with a fun event that's coming up in Topeka. It is the Golden Jubilee for the Kansas Central Jurisdiction. It is a faith community made up of churches from around Kansas. Reverend Tina Carter, Pastor Samuel C. Mitchell, they both work with Open Arms Ministries in Topeka. They are part of the Kansas Central Jurisdiction. The jurisdiction's Bishop Milton P. Jackson Jr. also was along, and they told us what they have in store to celebrate 50 years of service.
Welcome to all three of you.
Thank you.
And it is the Kansas Central Jurisdiction that we're celebrating, right? Tina?
Yes,
What
it
is
is.
it that they do, and what's the milestone we're reaching?
Well, we're reaching 50 years of service, and Kansas Central is made up of a number of different churches, and we feed the sick, and we feed the hungry, and we have clothing banks, and we do harvesters, and there's a lot of missionary work that goes along with even just preaching and teaching the Word of God.
Absolutely. So Open Arms Ministry, Samuel, what do you all do in the Topeka area?
Oh, well, as she said, we have clothing bank, food. We give away food every fourth Saturday. We mentor little children, and we have a youth ministry. We have 2 studios in our building.
Oh, wow.
We do quite a bit of stuff.
And so this is being repeated at churches throughout the Kansas Central Jurisdiction. So Bishop Milton, when you talk about celebrating 50 years, what do you have planned to celebrate?
Well, we're going to have our gospel, well, I shouldn't say gospel, but a jurisdictional Golden Jubilee celebration on April the 26th, and we're going to have our keynote speaker will be the presiding bishop and chief apostle, the Bishop J. Drew Sheard. He will be our guest speaker for this momentous occasion. Bishop Sheard leads the largest Pentecostal denomination with over 6.5 million members in over 112 countries. So our jurisdiction is a part of a denomination that is worldwide.
Wow.
We're covering 112 countries. We are really excited about Bishop Sheard coming to be with us, and he also is the husband of Karen Clark Sheard of the Clark Sisters, a nationally renowned recording artist.
Nice.
So we're excited about Bishop Sheard coming to Topeka. I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and I told him everybody in Topeka is talking about him coming. He said, I'm excited about coming, and so we're looking forward to having a great time with this great great service that will be going on in Topeka, Kansas.
As bishop, how satisfying is it for you to have seen how the jurisdiction has grown over the 50 years?
Very, very exciting. I'm involved quite a bit with several different type of ministries, and one of the things that I like to do more than anything else is help people to reach their maximum potential in serving the Lord and be productive in the society that we're living in.
Samuel, even if people aren't members of Open Arms Ministries or one of the Central Jurisdiction churches, why would you suggest they come to the Jubilee celebration?
Well, first of all, we have a bishop that has been serving in Kansas Central in the city of Topeka for 50 years. I believe he's been with the jurisdiction for 50 years in this city. He's been pastoring for 40 years. He's just been doing great things and raising us up as churches to do different things. But his main thing is saving souls. And I think it'll be real interesting for anybody to come and see. And then on top of that, he was able to get our chief prelate to come all the way from Detroit, Michigan, to celebrate with us.
So it's a big deal.
So that speaks highly for our visionary right here, you know. So
celebrating you, Bishop Milton
right.
Jackson.
Yes, absolutely.
Tina, if people want to come, I know it's April 26th, 7 o'clock at the Hotel Topeka at City Center. What do they need to do if they'd like to come?
They could call me
There's your number.
at
right there.
720-300-0029, or they can email me and I could give them more information. They can even go out on Givelify, that's a church app, and you could go out there and you could just pay for your tickets right there.
Well, you're so pleasant, though. They'd rather just speak with you.
Yes, most definitely. Yes.
Reverend Tina, Pastor Samuel, Bishop Milton, thank you all for being here, and good luck with the event. It sounds like a fantastic message to be shared with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
They are so excited to welcome the special guests to the capital city. We wish them a fantastic celebration. Again, that's coming up later in April. We are glad you could be along with us today for this Eye on Northeast Kansas podcast. Remember, you can see the videos of all of these conversations and with all of the guests that we welcome into the studio on WIBW.com. We also post them on our WIBW 13 News YouTube channel. Just search it on YouTube and be sure to click subscribe while you're there. Check out a lot of other fantastic videos as well. And of course, you can see the videos along with our studio selfies on my Facebook page, WIBW Melissa Bruner. We always have great conversations, great people. Glad you can come along to listen in. Until next time, we'll see you on the Red Couch.